So I think what I'm going to talk about this morning is something not everybody seems to talk about, but it's something we deal with every single day, and that's human nature. What is human nature? And what human nature really is. And I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not a psychologist, and I don't have a degree in anything. But I think just overall looking about, it's fairly evident, what we deal with on a daily basis. Who's the greatest? Seems to be what goes on more or less every single day. Who's the greatest at your work? Who has that ego? Who wants to strive to be the best or show off to be the best? They put themselves beyond everybody else. It's them. It's all about me. That seems to be the whole thing today. It's me. It's all about me. But who's the greatest? It seems to be uppermost in everyone's minds. Rivalry and strife, they're everywhere. It's all over the place. Whether you're working, when I worked at Woolco in high school as a stockman, and that really meant nothing. Stockman meant you went out, you swept the floor all day long, or after school until you were done and you went home. Or you burned the trash, and at that time, back in the 70s, we had a great big incinerator in the back of the store, and we would burn all the boxes. And so the low man on the totem pole was the guy who was burning all the trash. So when I came in, that was my job. So, you strove to get past that to go sweep the floors. But then you really didn't realize how bad sweeping the floor was until you went out and swept the floors, because you started at one end and went all the way to the other. And you couldn't stop until you were done. And then you had the store managers coming behind you looking under what you were doing. And so, striving to be the best, sometimes you're like, maybe it ain't so good, You're going from one thing to another. What do you guys think about human nature? What is the biggest problem with people that you deal with every day?
Self-centeredness.
Self-centeredness? Greed. See that you hit that, self-centeredness and greed. I've got selfishness and greed right here. So you guys you see it every day. Greed in what manner? Sorry?
Have it my way.
Have it your way.
Yeah.
Monetarily, everybody's striving to be better than their neighbor, wanting more than their neighbor, keeping up with the Joneses. That's what I always used to say when I was, everybody's got to keep up with the Joneses. Jones got a brand new car. You got to get a brand new car. That's the big deal at work right now. Everybody's getting these brand new trucks, these huge monster, unbelievably expensive trucks. I mean, I don't even want to. One guy's paying $1,000 a month in a truck payment. Ow! I can't imagine that. I can't. When Kim and I got married, we bought this little Toyota Corolla. It was brand new from Lakeland Toyota. It was $173 a month. And I remember an elder here at the time. He goes, "Man, what are you doing?" He goes, "That's outrageous." Well, there was a need. We had to have a new car, and there was no way around it. So $173 a month didn't seem to. Yes, sir. Okay, I'll thought you had a question. See, at that time in 1979 was outrageous, but $1,000 a month today seems absolutely absurd. So I don't care who you are or what you do. That's a lot of money for a vehicle that you drove off that loses, appreciation every second you have it. So selfishness and greed. Selfishness, people, and I guess greed and selfishness could be kind of the same. You're selfish about what you want, what you need, and that ties into being greedy. Whether it's within the family or whether it's a sister or a brother or an aunt, uncle, or cousins or whatever. There's those things that play out within your own family. my thought was with keeping up with the Joneses was, I'm never going to try to keep up with the Joneses. I'm going to be happy with what the Lord did. You know, the Lord blessed you with what He blessed you with, and to be happy with that. There was at one time I wanted as much as what I saw somebody else have, and I was very young. You know, in the Lord, and this particular person had been in the Lord for a long time, and he was very blessed. And I was like, I want that, and I want that right now. Well, you know what? You can't get that right now. It takes time. You know, it takes time. It takes prayer. It takes, you know. And they didn't lord any of it over anybody. They were just blessed. They were just blessed. You know, and you know people like that. But Satan wants to put it in your head that you can have that right now. You should demand that right now. That's all yours. That's just selfishness and greed. You know, He's going to bless you if you let Him bless you, and if you do what you should be doing out in the world. You're working your job. You're putting away your money. You're saving. You're tithing. You're giving. You're going to be blessed. There's no way around it. Yes, sir.
I thought they hit you with temporary stuff, your desires and needs, temporary reason at the time.
I agree with that. There has to be a temper. You know, the Lord will temper you. Sometimes when you don't want to be. It's all taking it on the backside every now and then. You know? And listen, the Lord chastises who He loves.
Right.
You know, that's how you know you're a son of God. That's how you know you're loved. You know, you take a little whooping every now and then. I took a little whooping over that, and I learned that, you know, hey, listen, the Lord has for me what He has for me. You know, He has for you what He has for you. You know, you are blessed. Whether it's what somebody else has or not is not part of the equation. What you have is what the Lord has blessed you with. So, strife and rivalry, people want to get more than the other person. They want to outdo you. To me, sometimes it just seems like it's a waste of time that people are like that. You know what I'm saying? Why are you doing that? Why are you striving so hard to be better than somebody else? Why? You know, yes, do I want to put a promotion at work? Sure I do. But work for yourself for that. Don't make somebody else look bad to get that promotion. Do your work. You will. The Lord said He'll bless you. He'll make you shine. Do it as unto Him. Work as unto the Lord. That's it, right there. And you're going to be blessed. But some people, you see it where they want to, you know, make somebody else look bad in order to get that promotion or to get that next step up. Selfishness and greed. Believe it or not, at one time, there was no selfishness or greed on the face of the earth. At one time. Or even in the universe. All of God's creation loved God. They pleased God. And they were full of God's wisdom. And they were perfect in all their ways. Everything was in unison with God. How long it was like that? Nobody knows. It could have been thousands of years when Adam and Eve were in the garden. I mean, there's no, when you read the story, there's no time. You know, you don't know how long they were there. But they walked with the Lord every single day. They were in perfect unison with Him every day. Their thoughts, were all about the Lord. They're hand in hand every day with His wife. They walked about. It could have been thousands of years within the garden before Lucifer spoke what he spoke. And speaking of him, we're going to talk about him a little bit. Even Lucifer, the bright and shining one, he was like that also. When he was part of the angelic beings, he was in perfect unison with the Lord. And when we talk about Lucifer, we're also talking about Satan. And I don't want to get too many names involved. Lucifer, Satan. If you guys will go to Isaiah 14, we'll talk about Lucifer just for a little bit. And it's not going to be up there anymore. You're not going to find it. Isaiah 14, verse 12. I'll wait till the page is How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I, ego, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet shalt thou be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake the kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness, and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of his prisoners? The word I is huge in these texts. Lucifer decided that he wanted to be God. He thought he could be like unto God. He was going to exalt himself above the Lord. So before this happened, Lucifer was, as it called him, son of the morning. He had a place within the angels. He was one of the archangels. You know, he had a specific spot within the Lord's realm. And he had a thought one day that I will ascend myself above the Lord. I will be likened unto God. I will. So from that right there comes all the selfishness and greed we see today. Just from there. He thought that by doing so, he could be as powerful as God himself. When that was never going to happen. There was no way that he was ever going to be more powerful than the Lord God Almighty. Somehow or another in his head, though, in his ego, he thought he could. That he could do these things. And it just wasn't going to happen. Lucifer, after the fall, he loved self, he pleased self. His wisdom was corrupted, became foolishness. He became the father of lies. And he was full of iniquity. The sins that came forth after this was what we see today. So he was the morning star, and then he became the father of lies. Now, which title do you want? You know? He lost that title and gained the other. I don't think that was a decent trade-off, to be honest with you. You know, it doesn't seem like it to me. Lucifer, with his opportunity to love God, decided to love himself and please himself. His wisdom became corrupted and foolish, and he became the father of lies. This decision changed the universe from love, joy, and peace, and it reigned with unity, to a place where Satan was in rivalry with God continuously, up until today. It hasn't changed. All forms of sin began in his life. Even worse was that Satan, he sought to get as many angels as possible to follow him. When his ego took over, he tried to speak to the angelic host and bring them down with him, that they could all be like God also. So from that point, he was already lying. You know what I mean? He was already talking lies. He was trying to get people to follow him then. Well, there was no people on the earth at that point. So who's he talking to? He's talking to the angelic host. So that's how this all started. This, getting people to follow him. He sought to get as many angels as possible to live as he now lived. It seemed many listened to his foolish wisdom and lies and followed after him. War in heaven. If you go to Revelation 12, I'll read that one to you also. That's a heavy one. 12, yeah, Revelation 12. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his archangels, or his angels, fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast with him. Now I know there in some place it says there was a third of heaven that was cast out of the earth. So I don't know how many angels we're talking about here, but when we talk about Satan and his angels, we're talking about demons, obviously. And so, you know, the Bible never says how many we're talking about. But if that was a third, that had to be a lot. You know what I'm saying? Cast down into the earth. So they listened to him. They listened to the father of lies. They listened to what he had to say about playing upon their egos, about them being great, about them being, you know, able to do what God could do. Somehow or another, over the millennia, millions of years, eternity, that they were with the Lord. Somehow or another, you know, they thought they could too. When all they lived under was peace and unity, love and joy. Now that was going to change. That was going to change. So, and if you read the text, it doesn't say God cast them out. He said Michael the archangel, Michael the angel, and the angels cast them down. God didn't even move a finger. They took care of it. They cast Satan out. So they were listening to Satan back then. So, like I said, these were angelic beings. They worshiped the Lord nonstop. So somewhere in that worship, Satan was able to talk to them and was able to convince them to come and join his. I don't know if you guys have ever thought about it like this, if y'all have ever contemplated this at all, but you know, that's pretty heavy duty, you know. They're not human, they were angels, and they got persuaded. You know what I'm saying? And God, like I said, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. So you had Michael and his angels, the dragon and his angels. And prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So they fought and they lost. So he's 0 for 1. Okay? He's going to be 0 for 2. He just doesn't see it yet. Because when we're all taken up and we're all brought into heaven, and he's lost everyone on the earth because nobody's going to pay attention to him. We're all going to go to heaven. And those who are serving the Lord. That's going to be a number 2 loss for him. Because he figures he's going to win everybody over to his side. But that's not going to happen. When God created man in the Garden of Eden, Satan was soon there making a visit, seeking to get Adam and Eve to move from loving God to loving themselves. And if you guys will go over to Genesis 3. That's Genesis 3. We're going to read 1 through 19. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast in the field, which the Lord had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of every fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat. Neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. All right, here we go. Ye shall not surely die. I'm going to start lying right off the bat. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Now let's think about this for a second. What other gods would Adam and Eve ever even heard of? None. There was only one. That was their father, who came and walked with them every evening in the garden. What other gods could there have been that they would have known of? There wasn't any. So Satan's, how long did this conversation go on? Was it months? Was it years? For her to be convinced that they could be gods. And that she had to believe that there were other gods. Has anybody ever seen that before? I didn't until I got looking at this. I'm like, I never really noticed that before. How would she have been convinced of this? She'd have never known another God. Which there really is only one. Yes, sir.
Super, super subtle.
You talk about a silver-tongued devil.
Yeah.
There you go. That's where it came from. Silver-tongued devil. You shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. They'd only known good. That's all they'd ever known their entire life after they were created. They'd only known good. The good of the garden, the good of the fruits of the ground, the good of walking with the Lord every day. There was no bad in their life. They didn't have a bad day. They didn't have to till the ground. They didn't have to look for their food. I mean, it was shady. It was like Florida heat where you're out working in this heat. You know, that wasn't their day. It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. You know, they didn't know what a bad day was. They were going to find out a bad day, but they didn't know it at that moment. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was pleasant to the eyes. Now, I can't imagine. I mean, orange trees will look good, when they're all orange. And apple trees look nice when they're full of apples. I don't know that I would be drawn to eat one or the other just because it was pleasant to the eye. I don't know. Maybe I don't know why that was such a big deal. But that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. She took the fruit thereof, and she did eat, and gave unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of both of them were opened, and then they knew that they were naked. Before that, they had no idea they were naked. They were covered by the Lord. They were walking in the Lord's covenant. They were walking in His glory. They didn't need clothes. There's no need of it. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and Eve hid themselves from the presence of the Lord. And now God never had to look for Adam and Eve. He knew exactly where they were until this day. Now they're hiding. They're hiding. From amongst, and hid themselves in the presence of the Lord amongst the trees of the garden. And the Lord called unto Adam and said, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid. He'd never, ever been afraid before in his life. From the moment he was created from the earth, he never knew what being afraid was. Wasn't afraid of any beast of the field because he's the one that named them. He knew them all. He knew everything that was in that garden, every tree, every plant, every animal. Was never afraid. Never had to be afraid. Wasn't in his DNA to be afraid. I heard that voice in the garden and was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. And he said, Who told thee that thou was naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof which I have commanded thee, thou shouldest not eat? And the man said, The woman that thou gavest me, he gave her up. Gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. And the Lord said unto the woman, What is it that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all the cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly thou shalt go, dust shall ye eat all the days of your life, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt and thou shalt bruise his heel. Now that's talking about when Christ was put up on the cross and he bruised Satan's head at that point, the cross went down. And unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and thou hast eaten of the tree of which I have commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow thou shalt eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall bring forth unto thee, and thou shalt eat the herb in the field. And in the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return to the ground, for out of it wast thou taken, dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. So over all the lies that Satan told them, and however long that took, they finally they believed it. They believed in that lie, and thus became the fall of man and the sin of man. So the question is human nature really human nature? Or is human nature Satan's nature? Because you know how the world loves to call, well, it's just human nature. People are like that, it's just human nature. People are, it's human. Is it? Or is it Satan's nature that we've adopted? That has just, through the millennia, through the thousands of years, that people have adopted and taken over that ego, that selfishness, that greed, that sin nature that didn't exist before. But then all of a sudden, after Adam and Eve, it did exist. And it just spread like wildfire. So is it human nature, or is it Satan's nature? The world psychology would have you believe that it's just human nature. It's something that you're born with, something that it's inside of you. Until you're born again, until you decided that you want to love the Lord, that somebody spoke into your life that there was a better way, that you didn't have to sin, that you didn't have to be like that anymore. You could walk with love, joy, and peace. That was a foreign concept, to many of us. I wasn't raised in church. Didn't know what a church was until I came to this one when I was 18. So over my lifespan, church was to be avoided. We never went. It just didn't happen. We had family members that were saved, and they seemed weird. They wanted to pray, and they wanted to this, and it seemed foreign and weird, and it made you feel kind of, But that was God's true nature. It's His nature to pray. It's His nature to love everyone, regardless. It's His nature to put peace upon this earth, for us to live together in unity and peace, as the Bible tells us. But to the world, that is foreign. That is to be shunned and not talked about. Can't have it in school. We don't want our little kids to have peace in their lives and love one another. No, we don't want that. We don't want to tell the world about this other kingdom, because that kingdom is foreign to this kingdom. This kingdom rules and reigns under the hand of Satan. The government, the people, the princes, the kings, the rulers around the world, the monarchs, is foreign to them. It's not part of this, even though God has formed all the governments and set them in place. But there's no peace anywhere in this world. I mean, if you've been watching the news at all, listening to anything, I mean, they're blowing up tankers in the middle of the Gulf over there in the Middle East. Just to set strife within the world. Just to set everybody's teeth on edge. Satan does not want peace in this world. He wants one to raise up against another, one to fight against another, nobody to love one another. So, is it human nature or is it Satan's nature? What do you think? This is my thoughts. I'm not, I don't have a book somewhere that says, oh, this is what it is. I'm just asking the question. What do you think? You guys walk with the Lord every day. You guys work in the world every day. You have people you interact with all the time. If you were to tell them it was Satan's nature, they would probably lose their mind. Because the psychologists of the world, we're led to believe, well, the way you are is just human nature. It's just human nature. Well, you had to learn it somewhere. It had to come from something. It just didn't sprout all by itself.
Well, in today's society, people tend to think, well, I am the way I am because of my parents, or...
Yeah, we love to blame everybody else.
Exactly. And that started with Adam and Eve.
Sure.
Those that are in the...
They started blaming each other.
In the world, they have to have a label for it. Having taught special ed, that is the biggest thing. And if you were to say, we can cut that chain, we can break it, we don't have to follow Satan's order. That was just like, oh my gosh, what are you opening up here?
Right.
And it's gotten to the point that we would, even as Christians, rather accept that label than to buck against the flow and stand as a Christian. And that's why our nation is where we're at today.
Yeah, it's tough to take that stand for a lot, to change that idea.
I remember as a child, going up to my teacher and saying, I don't feel good, will you pray for me? And this was in a regular public school up in New York. Now, even if a child comes to you and asks for prayer,
Can't do it.
you can't do it.
They'll throw you out in the heart. Yes, Jim.
Would say that Bible than me that is my flesh is also no good thing. You got your flesh, the mind, like your spirit. So, person's got the soul's got to deal with one to the other, one way or the other, take the choice.
Right. I mean, it's sort of like you can't serve the Lord, you can't serve mammon. You can serve one or the other. But back in the garden, they didn't have that choice. They were in perfect peace with the Lord.
Right.
They didn't need it. He provided every need. Even in Matthew, it talks, hey, you ask and seek and pray, I'll make sure you have all these things. But you need to seek me first before you go off and do these other things, before you take it into your own hands, before you make this decision. Pray and seek me first. I'll give unto you, if it's for you to have. But see, we let our egos get involved with our prayers too. I want. Like I was telling you earlier, from what I had seen when I was young, and I saw this other older, experienced, Christian, and he had everything. He was blessed, and I was like, man, I want all that. I want that. So you can let that selfishness take over in your own Christian life, in your own ego. To pray, now you're praying amiss, the Bible would say. You're not praying what the Lord wants you to pray, or how He wants you to go in the direction He wants you to go. Now your ego's taken over. Now your selfishness is taken over. And now you're not praying the way the Lord wants you to pray. We've all made these mistakes. I've made these mistakes. So when I see things like this happening with the Joneses, I kind of reel myself back in. Wait a minute, I'm not them. That's not me. That's not our life. This is what we're doing. I'm not trying to showboat. I'm not trying to look at what I got. Look, come see this. That's not me anyway. I've never been like that. But when I see other people do it, I just shake my head. Why? There's no sense in that. Why are you trying to make somebody else feel lower than you? Are you trying to bring people down in the Lord because you got something? There you go. To lift up your brother higher than yourself. it's all about you. It should be all about you.
It's about Jesus. It's not anybody but that.
He did. He gave all. He got you know, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that He gave. He gave. He gave. He gave more than we all will ever give. So, selfishness and greed, it's rampant. It's rampant within the world. And it can be rampant within the house of God sometimes too, selfishness and greed. You read stories all the time about this pastor bought a $280,000 Maserati, and they're living in, a $13.2 million mansion. What's your people living in? What are they doing? How are they being blessed like you? You know? I think there's got to be a balance, when it comes to things like that. You can't overplay that. You know what I'm saying? You bought your wife a $280,000 Maserati. Why? Yeah. Why? What can we do with that money within your congregation? Who has needs? Do they need to be met? Can't take it with you. There's people there that needed it probably more than his wife needed it. I mean, I'm just saying, I've seen these stories here in the last few months. It just blows my mind. It blows my mind. So it can happen within the kingdom of God itself. We have to watch for this stuff. We have to be vigilant. We can't become selfish. We can't do that. We have to help one another. Even it's the smallest little things, smallest little things. The night the church burned down, the social hall, a couple things happened at that. When the power got cut, Brother Lowell's house had no water. He didn't have any water because his well ran off that building. And so we had to figure out a way to get some water to his house. Maybe not a great big deal, but we got a hose and went from Pete's house to his house and got him some water. And then Paul was living in the little building. He had no power. So we had to figure out a way to get power from this building to that building, so Paul could at least stay there until he got blessed and he got to move. Little things when we're thinking about somebody else. What do we need to do? How can we bless that person? So it's the small things. Kim always tells me this. She goes, it's not the big things you do for me. She goes, it's the little things you do for me. It's the small things that make me smile and make me feel that and know that you love me. That's all it takes for even all of us, just the little things. It doesn't take a great big gesture on your part to let somebody know that you love them. It's just the little things, a hug here. Can I help you there? That type of thing. We can work out the selfishness and greed from our own lives, and by just thinking about what the Lord had done. He gave. He loved the world so much that He gave. He's only asking us to give, and bless. So, was it human nature or is it Satan's nature? Because before that, it was just the Lord God Almighty's nature within their lives. That was it. And then sin came in, it was sin nature. It was Satan's nature. Human nature has just been, it's just a phrase that's just been put out there for the people to believe. He's like that. That's his nature. I don't necessarily, I'm with Becky on this. I don't necessarily believe that. I see you, Pastor. You asked me to come do this, I'm doing it. You get what you get.
If I can make one final
Yes,
comment.
ma'am, go ahead.
In the last 2 years, the hardest verse that I've had to live by is Philippians 4:11. To be content where God has me now.
No matter what state you're in.
And
That's a tough one.
for those that have known what I've gone through this last 2 years, 2.5 years, it has been a very hard walk in the natural. And I can only look to the Lord because that's all I had, literally. And now that things are turning around, God keeps reminding me, content in me is all you need.
There was a TV program, a movie, it was called The Apostle Paul. I don't know if you guys saw it over Easter. I don't know if TNT put it out or whoever it was. It was well done. It was really well done. And Paul, if you saw the things that Paul went through, but he was always content no matter what state he was in, whether he was in jail, whether he was in, he had nothing, he had all. And you don't really think about those things when you're reading this. You know, you're not really seeing what Paul saw or what he really meant a lot of times. But that movie kind of blew it out to you, and especially that part where Paul talks about that he was always vexed in the spirit, you know, and it showed him looking back in his mind at all the Christians that he had killed before the Lord knocked him off that horse and he went blind and his life was changed. All the Christians he had killed, he had persecuted, he had burned. That kept coming back to his mind. You know, that was what was keeping him humble. You know, because he saw what he had done before in his life. You know, it was if you hadn't seen that movie, it's a really it'll get you. That movie will get you because it kind of just brings everything to the forefront of things you never thought of before. I hadn't thought about that before. That he had to remember everything he had done before he got saved. Yeah. He thorn in his side, you know. So the Lord said, "Hey, my grace is sufficient for